So the compilation that's coming out hopefully this week is called 20. It's called 20 because it covers 20 years of writing. Technically, I guess there's 21 pieces in it, but that's,
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I'm thinking about like on the contents, like just having like the first 20 and then having a line and then having the new razor. So it's like a bonus or something, or
good idea.
like, yeah. But because I want it to end with new razor, you know what I mean. I don't want it to end with apocryphal stories.
Yeah.
I think New Razor's a really good ending for it. So, but at any rate, the artwork was done. We stole some photos. It was originally going to be designed by a girl named Roxanne Theophanis, and for one reason or another, she didn't do it. But she agreed to let us use her photos, and so we did that, and we took her photos, and Liz did. I came up with kind of the elements that should be in the artwork, and then Liz did the layout. So, and I asked Roxanne to do it because she's 21, and so she, there's no point of reference for someone like her reading my stuff, and so the sort of implied idea is new audiences, new people coming into this, new ideas, people who haven't been born yet, the audience that does not exist yet, and I really wanted to take it out of context, and her artwork and her photos are completely out of context, and I found this great kind of 60s-ish font. And so we have out of context with the future, because the people of the future will create their own context, and then we sort of have this implied out of context of the 60s, so out of context of the past too. So that's why it's sort of the old-ish font and the newish photos. So that's the sensibility of the artwork. So. Do you have a question, Tim?
No.
Okay. Well, I can run through the pieces that are in the compilation. Is that?
I think that would work.
Okay. If there's anything like you would like to know or anything you think would be helpful, like jump in.
Absolutely.
Okay. The first piece is called "The Lighter Side of Suicide." It's from '91. And it starts off, I didn't use anything from the 1991 section of No One Will Ever Love You, because the one piece I wanted to use had a really huge, glaring grammatical error, which really bothered me, and I couldn't justify its use. So I went looking for another piece, and so I pulled Lighter Side of Suicide, which was not in my first book, but was in extracts. And the other reason I chose it was because when I first started writing, all I ever wrote in my early days, for the most part, was I wrote in sentences and paragraphs, because I had only read like Edgar Allan Poe and Carl Sandburg at that point, and I was really starting from the barest of bare bones, and so I thought it was kind of perfect to start off with a piece that was written in sentence style.
This is a good example of what you've called in the past single-cell organisms.
Fuck yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's not even anything to add to that. So you heard that, everybody? Single-cell organisms. Yes, I couldn't agree more. And that was, that was a conscious decision back then, because I knew I was starting off small, and it's like with my guitar playing. I have tapes of me at 12 years old writing, playing guitar feedback and just doing sound manipulation, because I knew that I couldn't be Steve Vai and go diddle, 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 so.
So single-cell organisms kind of equate with sticking your toe in the water kind of thing.
Yeah, and the first movie I made was around that time, called Cramps, and Cramps was just basically a series of single shots and just stuff taped off TV, and there was no sound, because it was just starting off very basic. So it was just like a series of like just sort of pictures, and sometimes something might happen and sometimes something might not. It would just be like a still photo of like a wall, or I think Cramps opens with a shot of the ceiling. That's it. There's nothing that happens. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't lead into anything that comes afterwards, because that was what all my early stuff was. It was putting toe in the water, but also like one step, just very fucking basic,
Yeah.
So, I don't know. One of my biggest inspirations was Brian Jones, and I just always thought of it in those terms. I mean, at the age of 12 and 13, I was thinking of it in those terms. Like, well, he started off fucking doing like Howlin' Wolf covers, and like just teaching himself like these very, very, very simple 12-bar blues things, and within whatever 7 years, he was doing the Mellotron stuff on "We Love You," and I always sort of looked at it like that. Well, I'm starting off at bare basics, and eventually I will hopefully evolve into.
And how did you feel about like going once you would create these first pieces or these first films, and you'd go back and listen to read, view? What was the reaction? Was it encouraging? Was it discouraging? What was the feeling at the time?
At the time, it was embarrassing.
It was.
Yeah.
Okay.
At the time, it was embarrassing. I have been doing this so long that I am now not embarrassed by any of it. It's like a big circle. Eventually, I passed the widest point of the circle, and I'm no longer embarrassed by any of it. But for a long time, my first couple of years of writing, I was really horrified by it. But that was internal. Externally, I of course was pushing it on anyone who would read it. And if I got attitude from a teacher or from an adult, or there was one person I used to be friends with who intimated I had no talent, I would be completely indignant and be 1000% certain of my path and my goals, and so there was a very funny contradiction there.
That external assurance, that, I mean, obviously it was obviously very crucial to you at the time.
Yeah.
Obviously at this point it was even more crucial, but how did you know, maybe this is hard to answer, but how did you know that that's a portion of the whole activity? Do you know what I mean? I mean, most people would feel the embarrassment and conceal it away in a hidden drawer and, swear to never touch the stuff again.
Yeah, because
what was that was pushing? I'm sorry.
No, because I invented myself. I made a conscious decision that I was going to be this guy named Rich Millett, and that I was going to say the things that the Rich Millett will say, and I understood, and I couldn't have articulated it at the time. I could not have said this 20 years ago, but I understand it much better now. I understood that I was manifesting my future. And so this is very crass, but on my first day of high school, I remember looking down at the student body. I was coming down the stairs, and there's the sea of people. It's 5 times bigger than what I had gone to grade school with. And I looked down, and there were all these girls, and I thought, by the end of these 4 years, I will have fucked at least one of them. I've got 4 years to get one out of these hundreds. It will happen. It will happen. And that's a crass, funny version of it. But on a more serious level, I understood that I was creating my future. I understood that I was creating myself. And it's funny because a few years later, I read an interview with Paul McCartney, and him and John Lennon, when they were writing the Beatles songs, would make a joke when they started having hits. They would say, "Let's write a swimming pool. And let's write a Rolls Royce." And I was just doing that on a completely unfinancially rewarding level. I wasn't making any money, obviously, and I wasn't trying to make any money, but I look at it like this. Like, every single friendship I ever had that has meant anything, any relationship I ever had, has basically come from me being creative. Like, I created it kind of in the same way that I write, and I've been able to attract people using a lot of the same methodologies and techniques that I would to create my work. So, and the other thing was I just was really obstinate because I had to be. You know, I just felt like I had been really ground down in the years previous, in like my pre-adolescent years. You know, I was physically beaten up. I was verbally always being cut down by my peers and by the elders, by the adults, and
this empowered you?
Well, because I observed, I guess, what Terry Gilliam would call all the headmaster tricks. You know, when I saw it, I could see, I would watch what they would do to other kids, you know, and I would watch how they would, like, untangle, a kid would have an idea, and I would watch a teacher or a parent or something untangle their idea, or kind of pull the rug out from under them. And that made me very obstinate that even if in the moment they could outwit me, that still wasn't going to change anything. I was still going to fucking go home that night and do my thing. Even if they embarrassed me and humiliated me and were smarter than me. I didn't give a shit, because my attitude was always like, my grandmother's brother did that to me once. And it was right around the time I started writing, and he had disproved me on something about World War II, and this was the first time I really talked back to a relative, and I just remember I said, "Wow, you're 75 and I'm 13. You outwitted me." And like, it took 6 decades. You're 6 decades ahead of me, and you really let me have it. And so I was just really obstinate that I was, like, not going to be fucking, like, talked down to and ground down. You know?
Primarily because you knew you had that freedom later on at home.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, exactly. You know? I was kind of on my own enough that I could just sort of leap into, you know, the transcendent state. And that's where I got all my, you know, that's where I got the truth from, you know.
Would you like to elaborate on that term?
The transcendent state is something I kind of discovered, not by design, but sort of by accident. Oh, okay. And it was something that I discovered basically primarily from listening to music, but I found that I could go into, and you know, it's no different. I mean, people do meditation, they chant, you know what I mean? They om or whatever. I discovered it by listening to music, and I discovered that I could go into this other realm of consciousness. And so, like, years later, when I found out that people were into Hare Krishna, or people were into, you know, meditation, or even when people were dealing with hallucinogenics or any of that stuff, I had done that at 12.
You'd invented it for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing it and had been doing it, and that's basically where I got. You know, I got a lot of my answers there. You know, and I could go on for hours. I'm trying to be succinct with that.
Yeah.
I could really go into unending detail, but
no, that's probably not necessary. But I think it's definitely necessary to, you know, mention, because it's obviously central.
Yeah.
To taking it beyond the one single cell organism.
Yeah. And, I would go on long walks, and I would become different people. I would become some guy named Dave, and I was 31 and had a middle management job and drove a Honda. And I would have Dave's experience in life for that hour while I was walking. Or, a lot of unified field stuff, but I didn't know that at the time. Or I would, it was very difficult, in the pre-internet age, audience of the future, it was very difficult to find, it was very difficult to come across things. And so I would read that there was, I remember reading an interview with Johnny Zazula, and he mentioned that he liked Sun Ra. And I was 12 or 13, and I didn't know what Sun Ra was. I didn't know. I had never seen it before. I just saw, because somebody said, well, did you like things that are weird? He's like, weird, nothing. I was into Sun Ra. So the context of his answer led me to believe that Sun Ra was very far out. And so I would walk around and imagine what Sun Ra was. And I would imagine in my mind what this crazy music could possibly sound like. So in my mind, like when I actually started buying Sun Ra records, and like they were like, jazz recordings like the 50, like a quintet of people or something, I was actually kind of disappointed because I had a 3-hour phantasmagoria in my mind of what it...
Far better in your mind.
So, but I mean, I would just do I was constantly just kind of off, and, There's a movie we did in 1993, and I watched it not that long ago because I was trying to transfer it to digital, and I was really shocked at how inarticulate I was. And it really struck me. I thought, that's why the adults thought I was fucking cracked. That's why they were always trying to get me on medication or put me in front of a psychologist. Because I was really shocked at, like, I would only give, like, 3-word answers to things. And 3 words that may not really connect. And I realized, I was like, I bet between the things I was saying and my demeanor, I probably was very off-putting to people. And that's probably, that may be why they were so stupid with me. I don't know. Okay. Moving on.
Yeah, you want to go into the next...
oh, yeah, sure. Father. Father is... Father, I got back from England in September of 1992. I was there for 2 weeks. It was really amazing, and Father was a very big deal for me to write. I wrote it one night. I was supposed to be doing homework, and I was not doing homework. And the first 2 pieces in this compilation, by the way, were written using a technique that I don't really use anymore because I would now find it to be wasted energy, but at the time it was really important. I would write 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 pieces in one sitting. I would finish writing one, I would stop, I would look at it, then I would start another one. And I would just jump ideas like, okay, now I'm going to go do one like this. I did one that was whatever, this style or this structure. Now I'm going to go do the opposite structure. And, and I would just... I called it composing sessions, And Father was written... that and one that I never put out called Home is Where the Heart Limps, I think. And Father, I was very proud of because I had been writing for a little over a year at that point, and it was the first, I felt, complete thing that I ever wrote. It had kind of like a beginning, middle, and end. It had identifiable characters. It used repetition and a structure. It wasn't just sentences. It felt like a huge progression to me. And it was also the first time I ever did editing, because it originally had an epilogue where I go to the father's grave and I fucking piss on the grave or whatever. And I read it back and I was like, no, I can't use it. So that was like the first time I ever took something out.
That's a huge step.
That was a very big deal.
Step. When there are so many ideas that you can actually subtract some and shape it down to something else.
Yeah. And I want to make this clear once again. Father is not about my father. The experiences detailed in the poem Father do not come from my biological father. He was not a skirt chaser. He's certainly he's had less alcohol than I have, and I don't drink. So, none of those experiences. There was a very strange thing when I graduated 8th grade. We had I had a graduation party. It was a group of friends, and we went walking around afterwards because I had desecrated part of the school lawn on graduation night, and the party was like 2 weeks later. So I wanted all of us now to go as a group to go desecrate. I had done it on my own, and now we were going to go as a group and desecrate it further. And this kid who was at the party, and I don't even know if I had directly invited him, but he showed up, and I had never really spoken to him. And we're out there, we're breaking curfew, we're slightly vandalizing it. Nothing major, but, as you will when you're that age. And he just starts opening up about his father's alcoholism and infidelities and lies, and it was pretty shocking. And I never saw him again. So the last conversation I ever had was the only real conversation I ever had, and I put that in the memory bank, and I drew upon that when I was writing Father. So it's not my personal experience. So once again, see, that's another reason why it was a big deal for me, because it was writerly. It wasn't my personal truth. So, but I figured most parents are bastards, so. And it was my first sort of hit, quote unquote. Like when I would show it around, everybody got a big buzz off of it. So, it was kind of the first thing I did that kind of got like noticed or whatever. So, and the other thing that Father is about, because sometimes you'll create something, and something a piece will be about something, but you don't actually say it in the piece itself. And a lot of what Father is about, in a way, or I think what tripped it off, at least in my subconscious, is in England at the time, there was a big uprising of the National Front. And I would go off on my own while I was in London, and there were like the posters that were like kind of plastered up on the, like announcing like upcoming movies or concerts or something, and they were just like put up like overnight, like a flyer, and I would find like the loose corner, and I would rip down the National Front stuff, because I thought they were just disgusting. So for me, Father has always been about racism, even though it doesn't talk about racism at all. So I figured I should, after all these years, I've never really talked about that, but that was, in some abstract way, that's what actually planted the seed. So it's not in there, but it is, I guess. I don't know. So let's go forward. Yeah. The next one is from 93. It's Summer Equals Life. Another composing session. I wrote 5 or 6 that night. And I was in Rhinelander with my family. I was alone. I had a room to myself. It was the first time I'd ever had a room to myself. And they didn't have cable TV up there. I mean, it was still kind of, it was still pretty barren up there. I mean, they had like 2 stores. I mean, you were like removed. And so I was alone a lot while I was up there. It gave me time to put together ideas. So the line in there about the snow on the TV, that's true, because they only got 2 channels, and those would eventually fade out as the night wore on. So, yeah, and it's one of my favorite things I've ever written. I've always loved it because I think it's so true to life. I think it really is the energy of being that young. I wrote it when I was 16 or 15, and I that's why I love it so much, is because I think it's an accurate representation of the mindset and the energy and the psychology, and it's very purposeful. It's not nihilistic. It's just really, really beautiful, and I really like that guy. I really like my 15-year-old incarnation. He was a really good guy, and I've tried to remain friends with him.
So you're kind of moving on at this point from being embarrassed or revolted by what you see the next morning. Is this right around that time?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely by 93, because I had been doing it for 2 years, and I was starting to learn things. I was starting, I at this point I had made friends with George, and John Sway was right around the corner. So I actually had people I could talk to about creating things and about writing. I had read a lot more people, so I was much more confident, and much more willing to explore beyond the boundaries of sentences and paragraphs.
So sharing this work with other people, that was kind of what helped you to appreciate your own stuff? Or...
Well, I always appreciated it, but I just knew that I could do better. I knew that, there's a ton of stuff I wrote in 92 that no one's ever seen. A ton of stuff. There's probably 20 to 30 to 40 things I wrote that year that nobody's ever laid eyes on. And I liked it, but I knew that I knew that I really shouldn't even be showing it to people yet, because it was leading to something.
Right.
And it just, so I was over the embarrassment. Even by the time I wrote Father, the embarrassment was long gone, And by the way, speaking of George, Father was the first thing I ever wrote that actually got legit praise. Like he really, the first conversation we ever had, we read each other our work, and I remember he really singled that one out and fucking compared it to Burroughs and whatever, and I had never gotten praise like that at all. The most I had ever gotten was, oh, that's interesting, or whatever. So that was enormously gratifying and really encouraging, But also, like I said, I was just, how do I put it? In Summer Equals Life, I referenced Sonic Youth, and by that point I knew a lot more about the world, and I knew there was absolutely nothing wrong with what I was doing. I really didn't feel like a square peg in a round hole. I could look at people that had come before me, and be like, hey, I understand these guys. And I could look at my peers, and I could say, hey, I understand these guys. And I no longer felt like I was this little satellite out there, just sort of broadcasting to whomever. I actually felt connected to things, and I felt very much like myself, if that makes any sense. I didn't feel disconnected from myself. Yeah. So all of that kind of, I don't know. I didn't feel like I needed to justify myself, so I could write something really skeletal like Summer Equals Life and be perfectly fine with it, this is what it is, and the internal and external were not clashing in any way over that. Yeah. This is it, here, take it or leave it, Yeah.
The embrace of being part of a group.
Yeah. And I had another piece that I wrote that night, called Shower, which a teacher at my high school, the head of the English department, ripped to shreds, or tried to. And she tried to do this word by word assassination of it, this takedown. And why are they red waves? And why is it, and literally word by word and phrase by phrase, why this? And what she wanted was me to rewrite it to her wishes. And I saw nothing wrong with what I had created. I really didn't. And maybe if that had happened 2 years before, maybe I would have been self-conscious and being taken down to such a severe degree. I may have folded if that had happened 2 years later. But because I was a couple years in, and I was like, well, there's nothing wrong with this. I stand behind it. And she would say, well, do you realize that you're quasi-referencing the myth of whatever, Parsinus or what, whatever. And I was like, no, and I don't care. This is what I have to say. And this is the way I chose to say it. And so by this point I was very, very, very certain of myself. And so. But having a group really doesn't mean fuck all. I mean, it's just nice to have. It's nice to have. It's nice to get validation from people. It's nice to have people who you can have those kinds of conversations with. And when you're that young and you haven't had those kind of conversations before, it's a very big deal, and it's very revelatory, and everything means everything. And you're super earnest, and everything is coming out. You're basically, the hot water is as hot as it can get all the time. So every perceived slight is operatic, and every gratifying stroke is operatic, and every time you fuck a girl, it's the best fuck you've ever had, and every cheeseburger you have on a half day of school is like, this is it, guys, we're gonna do it. And everything's super over the top at that age. But really, the group thing doesn't really mean fuck all, because I was doing it before that. I had started creating this body of work before that. But it was very nice, and it was very encouraging to have. And it was very nice to have, whatever, even though it was lame stand-up comedy, it was nice to have Poetry Slam stuff on TV. It was great to have that. It was great to walk into, in the early days of Barnes & Noble and Borders, to walk into those places and see the big fucking painting of Jack Kerouac, as opposed to, it's Hemingway, it's great, you're an idiot. It was great to have big fucking paintings of Jack Kerouac and Henry Miller and Allen Ginsberg, and it was nice to have these people be culture heroes. And I know people older than us like to complain that with the early 90s, a lot of these things were being sold out or whatever. But, fuck that. It's all about context and perspective. And you know what? I was new to all this stuff.
Yeah, that's how they got to us.
And it's how we found out about it. So, you know what? That was cool. So I found out about the counterculture because it was in Rolling Stone. Well, I didn't know any different. I didn't have an older brother. I didn't have any cool friends. I had to find out about things where I could. And so it was very gratifying to open up Rolling Stone and see an article about whomever. You know what I mean? It was great. So, it was very fruitful to have everything from, Jack Kerouac to articles about Sun Ra or Miles Davis or whatever. I loved it. So it's not. It's just, it was nice to have that. And it was nice to make those connections, and it was nice to finally have, because I am an only child. It was nice to finally have people that I could talk to that were my age, and they could say, "Hey, have you heard about?" Because at the time, Jack Kerouac was like that was the craziest thing I could have ever imagined. Like I said, at the time, pre-Kerouac, Dylan Thomas was the most far out thing I'd ever seen. So to have somebody tell me about, Ferlinghetti, yeah, I'm fucking taking that, So, where are we at? 94? What are we up to?
Yep.
Yeah, 94. Okay. Another one, another hit. Smells Like Assassination. I suppose probably my most well-known thing from this time was Mindjacker, but come on, it was written during Bill Clinton's first term. It's like printing an old newspaper article by now. There's no point in putting that in a compilation, I love that one, whatever.
Not timeless?
No, not at all. Are you kidding? There's nothing timeless. But that was the decision, and that's actually why it was tough to pick stuff from 94 and 95.
There's nothing timeless?
Well, okay, the elements of it are timeless, right? The themes are timeless. Rebellion against authority and all of, that sort of crap. Yeah, sure, those aspects are timeless. Individuality versus the repression, and individual expression versus censorship, and representative democracy. Sure, those things are timeless. Sure, but at the time, what I was writing, and it was, like I said, from 94, 95, it was tough to pick stuff for this compilation because at the time I was very much writing from, all those rap records out at the time. Every single one was like, it's 92 or it's 93, like every single one was a newspaper, and Jello Biafra, that was all newspaper. I mean, if you weren't around in 1981, you don't know who the fuck Phyllis Schlafly is, or Anita Bryant. I mean, you're not gonna, or Dianne Feinstein. You're not gonna know who those people were. I just happen to know because I paid attention to that shit and I was around adults all the time. But that stuff was, those were newspapers, and I was getting into Phil Oakes and Woody Guthrie, and that was all newspapers. So Ice-T, KRS-One, Woody Guthrie, Phil Oakes, Jello Biafra, that was all newspapers, and I was writing fucking newspaper articles back then, basically. So Smells Like Assassination, I think, is one of the more timeless ones from that period. And still kind of, because obviously I was writing stuff like Over, Under, and Hyperactivated and Cunning Linguistics that were way far out and bizarre, but I don't think they're really indicative of kind of what I was mostly doing at the time, which is why I chose this one. So anyway, this one was a big deal at the time because it was, it was about this girl. Well, everybody thought it was about this girl who ended up dying, and people acted like I had fucking cast a fucking hex on her. People acted like she fucking committed suicide because of it or whatever the fuck. But what had happened was there was this party that had occurred that I had selected not to go to, and actually a lot of the people in my circle had chosen not to go to, and I knew like one person who had gone to it, and I was getting all the dirt. Like a week later I was getting all the dirt, and we were just kind of making fun of it. And on the way home, I just started doing so did you go to the party? Did you have a good time? Did you get a boyfriend? All that. I just was sort of goofing around, and then I couldn't get that rhythm out of my head. And the next day, my parents were decorating their house. They were putting up the Christmas decorations, and I did not participate. I sat in my bedroom with all the lights on. I can still remember it. I had a black shirt on and jeans and these huge fur slippers, and I sat, and I almost never wrote in my bedroom ever, and I sat in my bedroom and with a purple pen, and I wrote this thing out in one fell swoop, and while I watched my parents decorate the Christmas tree. And that's how Assassination was written. Oh, hey, the wife is here. Hey, hun. Hey, come on. You're on tape. Don't use that kind of... Say hi to...
No. You just do what you gotta do.
Jesus. Elizabeth, say hi to... People are going to hear this.
I said hi.
There, see. Do you hear that, audience of the future? Attitude. This is Attitude in 2011. This is what Attitude sounds like.
Fancy contraption.
Nothing but the finest. But... The first draft of Assassination was very much specific about this one particular person, and I had brought it to school and everybody read it and everybody got their kicks in, but then I took it and rewrote it and made it much more general because I didn't like that everybody was in their minds turning it into this thing about this one person, and so it's about everybody.
Sure, it's a mentality that existed at that age.
And we are and what nobody seemed to understand is that the narrator of it, everybody is equally implicated. Everybody is equally guilty. No one is innocent. It was about the entire scene. It was not about one person. Every single person is guilty of the conceit that is being ridiculed in this piece. And that's why I love it. And that's why I'm very proud to have written it at that age, to be that young, and to have sized it up and slammed it down in such a way. No one was innocent. Oh, and the Smells Like Assassination. there was a person, Ruth, and "smells like ass" was an asinine phrase that she had come up with. And so I stuck that on the title as a way of ridiculing her. So if you want to get specific about somebody, there you go.
Really, I did not know that was hers.
That was a little poke at her, and apparently she didn't like that I used that as the title. But the thing was, I wanted to poke. I was poking everybody, but people, fucking people limit you, and they want to break you down, and they want to fucking like reduce what it is you're saying to their level of comprehension. And they don't want to think that they're fucking guilty of that kind of conceit. But they are. Of course they are. Especially when you're young and trying to figure things out and trying to get acceptance and whatever, So I don't know. I'm enormously proud of it. I think it turned out really, really good. And it's one of the only pieces from that time that I would still consider like doing a reading of now. Because most of the stuff, like I say, it's newspaper, or it's just way abstract, which is great. But, this one I'm perfectly fine with. It holds up. And by the way, I mean, look at the fucking jump from like 92 to 93 to 94.
Yeah, that's the first thing you notice.
It's almost like a different person, I don't know. Do you have anything you want to toss in? Okay. All right. Now we're going to make a real jump. Hey, hon. The wife is leaving now. Bye, darling. It's been real. So,
on to 95.
95. This was written at the very, very, very end of 1995. I almost felt like it was a cheat because the early 1995 was like 3 separate years for me. There was a lot of stuff that went down that year, and the whole early part of 95 was when I was writing kind of my most political, kind of one-dimensional, linear stuff, and a lot of people really liked it, and I, got a lot of standing ovations whenever I would do readings and got a lot of attention and stuff. By the end of the year, I was, for any number of reasons, I was a different person. And December of that year, I was now in college, and I was walking to Columbia, and it was a 8-block walk from the Jackson stop on the Blue Line to Columbia. And as I was turning right in front of the CNA insurance building, I got the line in my head, I have a syntax error. And it was very, very, very cold outside that day, and the wind was so bad. In the South Loop, it's like just a giant wind tunnel. And it was so bad, it was actually making me cry. The wind was hitting so hard and it was so cold, and I had gym shoes. I didn't have boots, and it was ice, this sheet of ice, and it was too early, like nobody had salted yet, and I'm like walking on this ice, like trying not to slip, and I basically am writing the whole thing in my mind as I'm walking, trying to get to the Columbia Library so I can write this stuff down. And walking as frantically as I can on a sheet of ice with just a pair of, gym shoes on, and crying because it's so cold. But I have a syntax, a frolicking banshee beast that won't leave me alone when I'm sleeping, when I'm eating, when I'm oblivion to like a cloud conforming to the heat. I have a syntax that gnaws my blood cells and steals my fire swing, distilling and apoplectic shaking. So I basically have the whole fucking thing memorized because that's how it fucking came out. You know what I mean? It was just like, and I couldn't stop it. And I in the Columbia Library at the time, there was a table and set of chairs that I sat at, and I wrote almost all of Coming Out and Plastic Candy Fetish at that table and that chair. It was, I believe in that very strongly. It was a power spot. And occasionally you're lucky enough to get into a place where you hit a power spot. And almost every time you go to that place, you fucking create something. You can fucking just manifest things like bang, 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 one after another. And that was a power spot. And that was... and I had a book that I didn't put out called Lobotomy Eyes, which immediately predated coming out. And I abandoned one to complete the other. And so I wrote all of Lobotomy Eyes there, basically. And I wrote this more or less in one fell swoop. If you ever look at the book extracts, I have the original draft there, so you can see it, how it was originally done. I did a really good job of editing this. It was very precise. And it's funny because the exact meaning of... First of all, epileptical illusion, I will explain the title. It's a play on optical illusion, elliptical, and epileptic. And I combined all of those things to come up with epileptical illusion. And... as for what it's about, there are people who have read it for whom it's like this cathartic, visceral experience, their private miseries, an exorcism of their private miseries. And I had a professor at Columbia who thought this was absolutely the best thing I'd ever written because he took it like it was parody, and that I was parodying, self-important people. The whole thing was a takedown. That was his concept of it. It was satire. They thought it was satire. So people's interpretations of it vary across the spectrum.
Did you clarify for him?
No. He loved it. And it was at the time, let's say it was 15 weeks. It wasn't until the 14th week that he liked me. Up until that point, I was like his least favorite person. So the fact that he liked anything, I wasn't going to clarify shit.
Did you appreciate a perspective that you had not intended?
Of course. Oh, yeah. Of course, yeah. And part of it was I didn't have any perspective on this. This was just written. I didn't, I know what it is for me, but what it is for me is probably like, if anything for me, it's a study of ambivalence. It's completely detached. I don't think it has a point of view. I don't think it's a portrayal of anything.
Is that a correct portrait of you at the time? Ambivalence? Probably not, right?
Well, like I said, I was in the middle of basically going from one person to another, to the point where within a few months of writing this piece, I was unrecognizable to people who had known me for years. And I just went through this phase where, I would literally imagine all the different aspects of my personality. And I would take them off like clothes. And I would visualize it. Because I was going to get and become whatever Rich Millett actually is. But all the things that people associated with Rich Millett, he's political, he's this, he's that, whatever, he's forthright, he's tells it like it is, all that sort of stuff. None of that was real. That was just what they were seeing. That wasn't actual. That wasn't me. I was never political. I was never honest. I never had fucking integrity. I was never the fucking balladeer of the barricades, right? I wasn't any of this shit. That was things that people were imagining. That was things that people were projecting onto me. And at some point I started to take aspects of that seriously. And all of it had to go. All of it. The whole thing had to fucking go. And so,
and this is late '95 when you realized that you had to shed these.
Yeah, I had started realizing it a few months before that, bit by bit, but by late '95 it was very apparent. By that point it was at the screaming point. What had started a few months before as a was now a very loud scream that this all has to change. And everything that came with it, all of the scene stuff, all of the slang, all of the references, all of the style of dress, everything had to go. The haircuts, the glasses, the shoes, everything had to go. All of it had to go. none of it could survive anymore because it was also narrowly defined, and I don't know who wants to do that. I mean, I didn't, I felt like my fucking art was being infected by having to say things. I remember when the Oklahoma bombing happened, and how sick is this? I fucking felt like I had to write something about it. And I felt like people were expecting me to write something about it. How fucking disgusting. It's a tragedy that, these people fucking lose their lives. These innocent people lose their lives. The government, very clearly, there was some monkey business going on with John Doe number 2 or 3, whichever it was. There was there's been all sorts of rumors and allegations ever since. It's tied into white supremacy groups, all this horrible shit. And my reaction to this is supposed to be, I must pick up the pen? That's sickening. That's fucking cancer. That's fucking cancer. And I'm fucking picking up the pen.
What should you be doing?
It doesn't matter. Do whatever the fuck you're going to do. Respond however you're going to respond. But don't respond like, well, clearly this needs my fucking authoritative voice to put it in perspective. That's outrageous. Talk about fucking conceit. I started writing this thing that summer. I started and I got 2 lines into it or something, 3 lines in, and I just put the pen down. Literally, I remember, I'm not fucking writing this. And I really felt like I was at a fucking dead end creatively because I wasn't sure where to take it, The whole thing had to go. The whole thing had to stop. It had just become an infection. And so the whole book coming out, the whole thing was written in 3 weeks or 2.5 weeks. It's the fastest I've ever written anything. And the whole thing is a fucking chronicle of this process that I was going through.
The disrobing of the labor, love the layers.
Yeah. That's why it's called coming out. Plus also, coming out is like a gay term. So I was like, okay, fine. You know what? I'm coming, literally, you don't know what angle to approach this title from,
Yeah,
so yes, I'm gay too. Whatever. I'm
sure. Throw
it in there. I'm black. I'm a Jew. I'm a woman. What I'm not. I'm a tranny. Whatever you want. Here it is. I'm a squirrel. Here you go. I don't. And so Epileptical Illusion was written in the center of all of this. How fucking disgusting. Fucking, the fucking socialists at Columbia, how fucking disgusting. Walking around in fucking overalls with facial hair, because that's the clothes and the look of the working man. These fucking kids at however many tens of thousands of dollars a year, private fucking college, strutting around, and wanting, telling me what I can and can't say because they want me to write articles and they want me to write rousing stuff for their publications, and so I can speak on a corner on their behalf. And there's some human tragedy, and I'm supposed to respond to tragedy by fucking writing rousing shit to tell people what to think about it. It's fucking cancer.
Stage material.
I will not play that fucking game. You know what I mean? I was adamant about it then, and I'm adamant about it now. Sorry to make it about this whole thing. I'm sorry. I totally steered that in a weird direction, but we can move on now.
What about this piece about the murder of Bin Laden that you did?
What? I don't remember that one.
Oh, I must be thinking of someone else.
You're thinking of Mitch.
Okay, yeah. It's Mitch. It's
The
Mitch.
murder of Bin Laden. Where's the... You'll have to hit me to that one. I'm just fucking around.
That was a joke.
Yeah.
Future audience.
That was awesome.